What's up, fellas? Moon here. Just want to take a moment of gratitude for all the new fellas who've subscribed to the channel from the Battleground Blitz series. I'm really glad that y'all are enjoying that. I'm having a lot of fun making that too. Even though it's not performing well, I really don't care because it's such a fun series to make and I'm having the time of my life with it. Silver Shard Mines did end up winning the poll, so I've got that guide coming out in a few days, but today I want to talk about something that is going to be absolutely critical going into the War Within, and especially when real rating is attached to the BG Blitz mode and not just the rating that we have currently in the pre-patch. And that is mindset and attitude. You see, I could teach you all the maps. I could teach you the best strategies. I could teach you really cool tips that may help you get an advantage or increase your win percentage in general through that way. But none of that matters if your mindset and attitude are not in the right place. And I really do just want to take the time talk about it in detail. So for those of you who are finding my channel for the first time, hi, I'm Moon, and in Battleground Blitz or in any competitive game, I like to go by the 30-30-40 principle, which is that 30% of your games are going to be automatic losses. Whether it be your team just is not a good team composition compared to the enemy team, whether you happen to land on a bad map for your class and so you're not able to be as effective. Sometimes the enemy team just are better players when it comes to the objectives and beat your team out. There's really not much you can do in that scenario, but 30% of those games are just going to be auto losses. On the flip side, 30% of those games are going to be automatic wins. Maybe you get a map that's very favorable for your team, maybe you get the better team composition, maybe you get the better players on your team that just stomp out the objectives, and that's that. But the remaining 40% of your games, you are going to have an influence on whether or not you win those. And dependent on yourself being at the right base at the right time or killing the right target, you will have a direct impact on your team's success or failure. And so why I like to set this all up is that whenever you're pushing for rating in any rated bracket, you are going to have play sessions that are not great. You're going to have sessions where you lose rating. I know you watch these series on YouTube where people like to talk about how they're climbing up to rank 1, how they're pushing for these titles, and in the majority of them, you see the content creator reach the goal. That's not the case for the majority of the public. With these content creators is you see their highlight reel of them winning all the time, supposedly, but you don't see the loss streaks. So you may queue up a game of Battleground Blitz and you get a 30% loss game. You know, it's pretty frustrating, but you shake it off and you move on. But then the next game also happens to be another 30% loss. Well, now you've lost 2 in a row and you're not really feeling that great. Maybe you're somebody who gets upset or frustrated with your teammates. Maybe you feel like there's nothing you can do. And so that negative emotion and that negative energy carries with you into that third game that you play. But maybe that third game is a 40% game where you do have a large impact on if your team were to win or lose. But because you're not thinking clearly, maybe the best play slips your mind that on any other day you would have been able to choose. And so you end up losing the game for your team, but because you were so frustrated from those other losses building up, you weren't able to at the time recognize that, and so you get even more angry. And then this leads into tilt queuing, where you're going to be performing significantly worse than you would otherwise. Or if you're somebody who likes to use chat a little bit too much, you could end up finding yourself saying some things that you don't really mean at the time. So I set this up as an illustration that your mindset and your attitude are not just reflections of your character. I know we don't really think about that in the time when we're in game, but it also does have a direct correlation on your win percentage. And sure, you may see a couple of really toxic, really unsavory content creators rise to the top because they're mechanically exceptional at this game. But if you tune into their live streams, you'll notice that it's nearly impossible for them to have people to play with because nobody wants to put up with their behavior. And this is, I guess, a great segue into my next point, is that your reputation does matter in this game a lot more than you'd think. You see, in World of Warcraft PvP, we are a significant minority in the player base. As of right now, we only compose about 7% of the active player base, and you will often run into the same people over and over again. I know in Battleground Blitz, there have been lobbies where I've queued into the same people like 4 times in a row. And so yourself absolutely losing your cool and flaming your teammates isn't just something that stays within the match too, but it'll stick with people. I know that there were arena matches I played with people in early Shadowlands, close to 4 years ago now, and those people will still recognize me in game. So if myself just playing a couple of games with people 4 years ago has an impact for them to be able to remember who I am, I think it speaks volumes and emphasizes that people will take notice of who you are. And so you can try and name change as many times as you want, but people will know who you are and how you act. And that does carry over to your reputation in other communities. And so with a community as small as the World of Warcraft PvP base, and don't get me wrong, I do want it to grow and succeed in the war within, but as it stands now, we're sort of like a niche community. Your reputation even holds a greater weight than it would in any other competitive game. Something else I want to mention, I was talking about how there's a direct correlation between your mindset and attitude alongside your in-game performance and your decision making. I also want to go alongside that by saying that I believe duo queuing is going to be significantly stronger than just solo queuing in Battleground Blitz. We're at the higher end of the brackets. You'll see that every healer will be duo queued with a DPS player on their team. Just because when you have two players playing optimally and they're coordinating and they're over comms and they can relay the information quicker than they could if they were just typing in chat, you can be a lot more effective on the map and make a lot more plays that you otherwise couldn't have if you were a solo player. So for my DPS friends out there who maybe are looking for that special healer out there to queue with, outside of myself being available, but there is this sort of teamwork component to success in game that goes alongside good mechanics and good strategy and good objective play, because in a team of 8 people you have to do something well with the other 7 players if you are going to secure the win at the end of the day. And generally, if people have good morale, or if they're able to shake off either disadvantages or going a little bit down in the game without completely tilting out of their mind, you have a better chance of bringing back the game and securing the victory, as well as making a friend who you can duo queue with in the future and increase your win rate significantly via that means. And I've seen this trap a lot in the community where people they'll tilt queue. They'll get frustrated. Maybe they get those 30% games, the 30%, 40% games. There's this sort of desperation to get your rating back that you lose. I know I've fallen victim to this too, where people will continuously queue even when they're tilted, when they should otherwise put the game down and either stop queuing rated mode. Maybe you can cool off by playing unrated battlegrounds. Maybe that's the solution. Or maybe you like doing dungeons in your spare time, or professions. Or I know with myself, I can be a very competitive person in general, so I have to completely swap game just to not overanalyze like a normal battleground or something of the sort. And that's okay if you need to do that. But I think it's important that we are avoiding tilt queuing, because 9 times out of 10 we're not getting the rating back, and if anything we're digging ourselves into a deeper hole that we could have otherwise climbed out of with ease had we just put the game down for a little bit. If I could just keep it real with y'all for a second, I am by no means trying to morally grandstand. I am by no means talking at you from a pedestal. These are things I bring up because I happen to struggle with it myself. If you tune into my live stream whenever I'm live, I can tilt too. I had really bad issues with tilting. I've said some regrettable things to my teammates before that I feel bad about in hindsight. Heaven forbid you encounter the player I was 4 years ago, where I would say the most insane, vile, unhinged shit imaginable that would get me very swiftly banned underneath the current social contract. And I'm just trying to emphasize that I am no exceptional person either when I talk about all of this, but in growing and learning and maturing and even still making mistakes along the way, I probably will mess up in the future. I will mess up in the future. It's just kind of how being human works. I want to really embody the principle of being the change you want to see. And I think if a lot of people can internalize that and be able to work on themselves as well, we will see the PvP community shift for the better. And I think it'll be a lot more inviting for people to come in and give it a try. For my veteran players out there, I do want you to think about whenever you were getting into PvP. For me, that would have been about 4 years ago, at least in a serious sense. But for you, it may have been 10, 15, hell, even close to 20 years ago. Maybe you've run into toxic players that really soured the initial experience. Maybe there was something about the game you didn't know that somebody else did. They proceeded to shit on you with it and then attack your character for it. And sure, it would be easy to spread this along to the next person if we were to act in vengeance or retribution, but it really doesn't do any good, and it doesn't make us a better player for it either. I firmly do believe in the ripple effect principle, and at least with this channel, in making these guides and making these types of videos, having these talks, and, you know, having some fun along the way, I do want to make some more silly content in the future. I do want to have as positive of a ripple effect as I can, and I do want to, as I've said before, be the change that I want to see. I think if I can overall act in a way the majority of the time that reflects the change I want to see, that I could inspire just at least one person to do the same. You know, in this new game mode, there's a lot of people who are going to be queuing that maybe are not PvP players, or maybe they're arena only players, they've not really done Battlegrounds before, but I am just going to go in with the best assumptions of those people, and maybe just assume that they don't know how the game works. They don't know the optimal strategies. Maybe they've not watched my Battleground Blitz tactics guides. Oh boy, self-promo in my own video. But I have to give them grace that they're still learning. And if I do that, I find myself getting less upset at people. But I do think it's easier to go forward, and I think the obstacles become less of a barrier whenever we do assume the best of people. I think if you're able to take the losses on the chin, and you're able just to assume the best of your teammates, it'll make you less mad at them, it'll tilt you less, you'll still keep your sanity, you'll still move forward, and I think you'll have an easier time climbing the ladder come the war within. So that's all for today's video. I just kind of wanted to speak from the heart and soul as opposed to the brain today. I hope you guys were able to get something out of this, and I'll see you guys in the next video. But until next time, this is Moon, signing out.